What's going on, you good humans? Welcome to guest episode 212 of Good Humans podcast. Today's guest has been on the podcast before. His name is Dr. Tyler Panzner. He's a PhD scientist and he studies how basically our genes work and how our DNA works. It's really cool. He gave up a life of research and really dove into personalized health. So what he does is he takes people's DNA tests and then he gives them a personalized health plan. It was really cool to understand how our cells work and the importance of personalized health and where he sees it going in the future. I got so much out of this conversation. I know you guys are going to really enjoy it too. If you do enjoy it, make sure you give us a 5-star rating, share it with your friends, give us a subscribe, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It all means the absolute world to me. You can also leave us a little review. I read them all and it really warms my heart. Also, our brand new Good Human Factory merch is on sale right now. It's over on thegoodhumanfactory.com. We have some really cool stuff, just like this shirt if you're watching on YouTube. We have a few new designs, Grateful Not Hateful, a reprint of the receipt tee, a bunch of hoodies, and a bunch of really cool stuff that I know you guys are going to love. So you can head over to thegoodhumanfactory.com, use the code podcast, 25% off all the merch for anyone who checks out this podcast, and it would mean the world to me. You can also learn all about the wellbeing workshops that I run over at thegoodhumanfactory.com for your workplace, sporting club, or high school. And I can get in there to teach some simple tricks and tips for your community's well-being. That's enough from me. Let's just jump into today's episode with Dr. Tyler Panzner. Welcome back to Good Humans podcast, Dr. Tyler Panzner, PhD. How you going, mate?
I'm doing great, man. It's been a while since we last spoke. Excited to be reconnecting and add some value to some hungry ears or some eager listeners, let's call them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yours was one of my favorite episodes I've ever recorded. One of the most downloaded, a few really viral clips. You are Actually, can you explain what you do quickly? Because I'll probably butcher what you do, and then we'll go back through a bit of your story.
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's in cellular molecular biology. So that's how our cells function on the molecular level. All the little nuts and bolts pieces, the proteins, genes, we could, touch on more of those in a bit. And my PhD is in pharmacology. So how drugs and substances affect the brain. Sorry,
Wow.
not just the brain. I like
Brain and
focusing
body.
on neuropharmacology, right?
Yeah.
Neuropharmacology. That was my initial big interest. But yeah, how substances affect human cells. Now, that was trained mainly in the context of medications, but as we'll explore more, I kind of apply that now to the holistic side of things as well. Vitamins, supplements, minerals, all these things affect our cells. So bringing that deep scientific knowledge into these more holistic root cause contexts to kind of marry both worlds.
I love that. I'm all about root cause. How can we, challenge a bit of conventional medicine and be like, what is actually causing this so we don't actually need to take the medicine? How can we, build that solid foundation? How can we build that baseline? Do you do anything just out of my curiosity, like breath work? And does anything outside of pharmacology or any outside of substances affect our cells?
Yes, that's a great question.
Like sunlight?
Technically, yeah, I mean, it depends how you break it down, right? Because technically, a drug is anything that alters our physiology, right? How our bodies function. So, in the most loose context or the loose definition of that, I mean, breath work absolutely changes our physiology, right? Sunlight does. I mean,
sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you consider all these things drugs, right? Sunlight can be a drug, right? Like if you use it the right dosage, it could be great, but if you overdose, you could get cancer, right? So I think depending who you ask, usually pharmacological things are usually things that you ingest that enter your body that change how your cells function. I definitely could see the argument for those things. Like they're not pharmacological agents, right?
Yeah.
But they absolutely are inducers or they promote changes in our cellular biology, which is why they change our overall mental state. I mean, breath work and sun exposure are incredible for mental health.
Yeah. Interesting. Sorry, I just wanted to precursor with that. Today we're going to focus on the pharmacology side of stuff, your absolute expertise. And there's some really interesting sort of directions that I think we can go today in relation especially to mental health. But let's give people a bit of a highlight, because if you want to hear all of Tyler's story, head back to episode 46 of Good Humans podcast. But do you just want to give us sort of 5-10 minute elevator pitch of what your upbringing was like, what got you into this education. You've spoken on your website about your personal experience with anxiety and depression, which was during your PhD studies, which led you to explore how genetics influence our mental health. So yeah, do you want to just take us a bit of a highlight what your upbringing was like, what got you into this topic, and yeah, then let's talk about your PhD, because last time we spoke, you were just about to become a doctor. You're now a doctor. You've got your PhD.
Yeah.
Yeah, take us through a bit of the
Yeah. Because I'm
highlight up
trying to
until.
think. I'm not sure if I just finished or was wrapping up. I think I
Yeah, I
might have
remember.
just finished and I
Might
was
have
kind of
just
just
finished.
starting this whole social media stuff, right? But yeah, absolutely. So, overall, I had a really great upbringing. Little brother, mom, dad. Like great upbringing overall. We all have. As we get older, we all realize, these things about childhood, this, that shape us, right? But hey, that being said. Well, I like to say no one's free of trauma, right? We all have some level of something we're exposed to in our life that shape us. But that being said, I was very blessed overall with my upbringing, very loving family. I was always obsessed with why. The question why and the question how. So in school, I always gravitated towards science and I just loved asking why, how, and the teachers would eventually tell me, Tyler, that doesn't matter. Like, we don't need to know that right now, right? I always loved the nitty gritty, the inner workings of things. I remember in AP biology class, we started learning about cells. And until then, I wanted to be the next Steve Irwin. I loved animals. I had lizards when I was growing up, reptiles. Like I wanted to be a biologist, a wildlife biologist. But once I started learning about our cells, how there's these trillions of mini cities inside of each one of our cells, right? Like all this complex stuff going on that makes me me. It was a whole new world that really got me fascinated in the more micro, side of biology. So when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for college, I didn't want to be a medical doctor. Ironically enough, I didn't want to work with people. I work with people now, but it's on my own terms, right? So I'm blessed to be able to do that. But I decided to do the cellular molecular biology because I just love the nitty gritty of how cells work. And yeah, I was just kind of doing that coursework. And I remember in my organic chemistry class, the professor drew a structure, like a molecular structure on the board, day one. And he said, this is caffeine. Caffeine blocks and binds the adenosine receptor to block you from feeling tired. I looked down at my coffee and I'm like, holy shit. It's not magic why it wakes me up, right? Like there's literally a cause and an effect for everything in our body. So that got me really interested. I've always been interested in the natural supplements, making my own pre-workouts. I was selling those out of little Ziploc baggies in college and stuff, right? Like doing all that, getting people, hopped up on these stimulants and stuff because I could make myself jacked up for the gym. I could calm myself down after the gym. Just how you can really change your perceived reality, right? Based on natural supplements. So I realized this pharmacology concept, right? My professor used that word because I was trying to figure out, do I want to go to pharmacy school? I like drugs. I like pharmacology. Do I go to pharmacy school? And I had one of my professors tell me, you should look into grad school for pharmacology. And actually kind of out of order, but until then, I didn't really know what pharmacology was, but I loved it. So once my professor told me what pharmacology is, I'm like, wait, me obsessing over how all these supplements work in my pre-workout, that's all pharmacology? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, yeah, I want to do a lot more of that. So I ended up doing my PhD right out of undergrad. And for you guys listening, pharmacy is more or less you learn how medications work and you apply those rules, right, in the real world, whether it's in hospitals or in a pharmacy. A pharmacologist, I was in the lab coat doing research, like working with mice, doing cancer experiments, growing cells, editing the DNA of cancer cells. So that's more on the R&D side. I really thrive there because I'm really, really creative mind and I just love doing what's new. If everyone's doing that, I'm going to find my own way and do something over there. Just always how I've been wired. And I did the first half of my PhD on neuropharmacology, so anxiety, depression, neural stem cell research, neurodegeneration. And I ended up doing my thesis work on breast cancer metastasis, and how breast cancer cells talk to your immune system and hijack it. So it basically turns your immune system off so it doesn't kill the cancer. And it causes inflammation in certain areas of the body so the cancer can metastasize. But it was when I got my 23andMe done, probably around 6 or 7 years ago at this point. Um, I was struggling with a lot of anxiety, brain fog, headaches, restlessness. A lot of people say it just comes with grad school, right? You're overworked a lot, underslept a lot, but I they wanted to put me on medication. I got the gene test done, and the genetics in there, they weren't these life-changing results that I thought. Old 23andMe, it was more likely to think cilantro tastes like soap, or more likely to have your pee smell like asparagus, which isn't exactly life-changing information, right? So, me being the scientist in training I went and looked in the raw data myself, the matrix code. I was able to find certain mutations I had that predisposed me to anxiety. I figured out what these genes were. I figured out what they needed to function better, and I supplemented with those. And those few supplements did more for me than handfuls of random supplements. And that's when I realized figuring out what nutrients you need based on your genetics is a whole new ball game. So that's what's initially got me really excited to do what I do now. And I started doing that on the side with friends and family, just learning over time. Finished my PhD, decided I want to go all in on personalized medicine. It's the future. How do we make, instead of having a depression protocol or an anxiety protocol, let's build a Tyler Panzner protocol or a Cooper Chapman protocol, right? What does each individual need? I view everyone as a jigsaw puzzle. Everyone has mutations, genetic mutations, which are misspellings in our genetic code. Everyone does. What are your biggest missing puzzle pieces that we can support naturally? That's essentially what I do for people now. A lot of genetic testing companies will figure out what medications you need. I think medication has its time and place, but when it comes to mental health, mood disorder medication, I think they're grossly overutilized. And, someone's anxiety is not a medication deficiency, right? They're lacking some other nutrient or they have too much of something else in their body. So I work with people to help them figure out exactly what they should and shouldn't be doing, foods, supplements, lifestyle wise, based on their specific genetics. And, it's funny. We spoke, I think, 3 years ago. I was just getting started. Now, things have gone crazy for me, but it's funny. There's a lot more people now doing this type of personalized genetic work, a lot more companies, a lot more big influencers and big names doing it. And, what I like to tell people is a lot of people know what these genetics mean. They know, you may have heard of the MTHFR mutation before. You ever heard of that one
Yeah.
before?
Yep.
Yeah. So a lot of people know what that gene means. You could have all these genetics. It's like a blueprint. But how do you know what tools to use? How do you make sure that that supplement that's helping your mental health isn't also causing other issues? You need to understand pharmacology, right? That's what I'm an expert in. So if you think about it, it's like how many doctors and coaches and influencers that recommend supplements are actually experts on how supplements affect the body?
Probably very small amount, if not
Very,
any.
very, 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 very small amount, right? So, you know, doctors got to go to all this schooling to prescribe medications, but it's kind of the Wild West with supplements. So I see so many people forget about wasting money. A lot of people end up getting sicker. They feel worse because what helps your depression or anxiety may make mine worse based on how we're wired. So when I finished the PhD, I worked at a cancer company for a year and a half while I was starting my business now. And I've been doing this full time for, two and a half years at this point. And yeah, it kind of brings us to present day now. I've done training programs for doctors and healthcare professionals. I work with people one-on-one to figure out their genetic blueprint and really just trying to educate people about these nuanced factors that a lot of people don't understand. We could talk more about certain dietary things that I see have an impact on people's mental health. And it could be a very healthy food that you're eating, but based on your unique body, it's actually causing issues. So how long was that? That was a pretty long elevator ride, right?
No, that was great. I clicked all the buttons on the elevator and we just went the whole way up. But no, thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations on your PhD and the work that you're doing. I think it's so fascinating, and I think a lot of people listening will be like, oh, I've tried so many things, but it's not working. But I think it gives people hope when you go, hey, just because one thing isn't working, there is something that will work for you based on your genetic makeup. So can we start there? If somebody's listening right now going, I've tried this and that works for a lot of people, but it's not working for me. What's the sort of step towards getting your genetics tested, to getting, your genes tested? We tried to record this episode as a bit of as an update for everyone a few weeks back, but my internet wasn't working so well, so we're re-recording. So I think you mentioned to me a few weeks back that you can get your gene testing done, and then you can still check out the results from America. And then, explain to me what, by getting your genes tested, what sort of information that gives you or a doctor to then go, can you give us sort of an example of someone who an SSRI might not work for because they've got a gene that it doesn't react well with? Is that the right terminology?
Yeah, so my approach, it's somewhat unique in my approach. A lot of people can practice genetics differently, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these genetic tests, well, first off, you get the cheek swab, right? That kit ships globally. So I work with people all over the world.
Cool.
Most countries ship to, including Australia. And you cheek swab, send that back to the lab. We get the results. And what makes my approach unique is I've been doing this for a few years. I actually hand make my genetic reports. Now, I'm not a massive company shipping out thousands of kits per month, right? And a lot of you people listening may be thinking of, oh, spend $200-300, I cheek swab, I get it all back, and it's going to change my life, right? Well, it can if you know what you're doing. Nowadays, it's you should use this company because we have a 50-page report. Oh no, use us. We have a 90-page report. But more reports, right? More information is not inherently better. A lot of people do the genetic testing, which is very accurate, by the way. Genetic testing doesn't really mess up the reading, but how do you interpret it? If they tell you, oh, here's 65 supplements that make sense based on your genetics, how in God's name do you know which ones are the highest priority, right?
Yeah.
Which ones you need the most, the dosages, the interactions between them, between your food, do they interact with your medications you're on? So that's why I spend a couple of hours for each client. I find the most broken things. So back to that jigsaw puzzle that I mentioned, I feel like we're all jigsaw puzzles. We're all going to have missing pieces. No one can ever support every single mutation. It's impossible. No one should take 50 supplements. I think that's crazy. I'm a big supplement guy, but a lot of people are over supplementing. It's all over TikTok shop, right? More is better, right? This, that. It's everywhere. So I like to find the biggest holes genetically, right? What are the most mutated things? So it's not just mental health. I also look at hormones. I also work with athletes. I also look into detoxification, right? Because to me, everything affects everything, right? So some of the types of insights I could figure out for people, I'll try to think of some that could be really life-changing for people. One that comes to mind is something called the CYP2R1 gene, CYP2R1. This is the gene that converts vitamin D into the form that circulates in your bloodstream. So if that's mutated, especially in a lot of different areas, because these mutations can stack up, right? Does your protein, and quick refresher here, a gene is your DNA, it's instructions to make a protein. Think of that as the workhorse of your cell, whether it's to make dopamine or make testosterone or make collagen for your joints, right? All of these are done by proteins in our cells. So if they work too good or not well enough, it can cause issues. So that worker,
So that's like the software. The gene is the software that tells the hardware, which is the protein, what to do.
oh, that's actually a really great way of putting it. Absolutely. Yeah,
And
that's a
if
good
you've
way of
got
putting it.
something wrong in your code, then it's going to give the wrong instruction to the hardware, and it's going to make the wrong
Exactly.
amount or the wrong. Yeah.
Exactly. And that worker may not work well enough. So imagine if this worker is an assembly line. It's supposed to take this vitamin D, convert it, and then pass it on. But imagine if that worker, instead of working an 8-hour shift, only works 2 hours a day, right? Maybe you have one mutation, it works 7 out of 8 hours, and you could be okay, right? But me, I have 6 mutations in that gene. So it only works 2 hours a day. So you see how it's not so much if you have a mutation, it's how many do you actually have. So these mutations, we study them. They're linked to lower vitamin D levels because you can't activate it. And they're linked to not responding to vitamin D supplements. So if you're listening right now and you've tried vitamin D supplements, you don't feel a difference or your levels don't go up, you probably have this mutation. And those are the people where we can, if you can't convert this form into that form, let's just take the pre-activated form, right? So basically, we don't need that worker anymore. So if that worker is only going to work a 2-hour shift, we're just going to get a special delivery of that specific nutrient it should be making, and then boom, now your cells are like, hooray, we have the missing form of vitamin D. So we know low vitamin D is linked to mental health issues, right? And you may go to your doctor, they give you vitamin D, it doesn't go up. They give you a higher dose. They start injecting you with it, but it's the wrong form, right? Because whether you get it through a supplement or an injection or a cream or whatever, or the sunlight or through food, they
Your body
all
can't
go through
change
that
it, yeah.
worker. It's the assembly line. It all goes to that worker. So then these are the people you give them that vitamin D, and I've seen people have miraculous changes within a few days sometimes
By just
because their
changing a
levels are
different to a
finally getting
different
up.
vitamin D.
Exactly. So, you know, there's a lot of other, I could go on and on for 12 hours about this, right? It's so exciting, but that's a good example of what I could do is figure out, okay, you can't make this. Let's give you that nutrient, right?
Yep.
We could also look into things like diet. You know, people talk about gluten or people talk about oxalates or people, all these different diets, right? We can figure out with high precision, are you actually more sensitive to gluten? Are you more sensitive to dairy? So rather than guessing and not knowing what's going on, you can be really targeted and really pinpoint these types of issues.
So fascinating. Yeah, it's all it's just in the intricacy of like how different we all are, which we all know that based on the way that we act,
Yeah.
we look, everything else is different, but then we sometimes forget that inside of us is all a little bit different too. Like you can't treat everything with just blanket things. Like I'm definitely going to get my swab done and get you to do a bit of a workup. I might leave in the show notes a link for people to go and do your swab and the sort of way to do that, because I think it's yeah, super fascinating. I want to round back to just the first part of your PhD. You mentioned that you were working on the neuropharmacology when it comes to depression and anxiety, two obviously of the most commonly brought up words when it comes to mental illness, when it comes to probably blanket mental illness. Even if you don't have a mental illness, people will be like, oh, I feel depressed, I feel anxious.
Yeah.
So it happens to a lot of us. And the way that I see it is like anxiety is, our sympathetic nervous system is activated too much, and depression is our parasympathetic is too much, and we're not, finding that balance and that flow between the two. When it comes to pharmacology and that first part of your PhD, any insights that are worth sort of bringing up when it comes to different things that can, positively or negatively affect mental health?
Yeah, so one of the labs I worked in, they were showing the effects of chronic stress. So basically, you would take mice and you would pair them against each other, and you would have mice that were more aggressive. And it was called a social defeat model, where basically you put two mice with each other, and then one mouse is a more aggressive and kind of bullies the other mouse. And then they keep repeating that. So basically, a certain mouse continues to get kind of bullied and kind of messed around a bit over time in a social setting. And it was showing that it actually activated a specific cell called oligodendrocytes in the brain. And these actually could lead to, well, so that chronic social defeat, that stress caused inflammation in the brain. And it would activate these specific type of immune cells in the brain and contribute to those issues. So it was this type of brain cell that wasn't normally thought to be involved in mood issues, but it was really highlighting, this was years ago, but we have a lot more data now that inflammation is a massive driver of mood disorders. So people talk about serotonin and dopamine all the time, right? Serotonin more long-term content and happiness. Dopamine more short-term. It's more about anticipating a reward, right? You're anticipating something.
Is
Now,
oxytocin more like connection?
yeah, exactly. Oxytocin is more social connection.
Yeah.
So that plays a role in things like breastfeeding or pregnancy or social interactions. A lot of other neurotransmitters, people tend to like focus more on, serotonin, dopamine more palatable for people.
Yeah.
And we're told how low serotonin is the cause of depression. Now, that is true for some people. There was a big study that came out a couple of years ago that was basically saying serotonin is not involved with depression. A lot of people took that and ran with it. They looked at a few genes with serotonin and said it didn't have a big role. My stance is there's infinite flavors. Let's just say anxiety or depression. Some people have the flavor of low serotonin that causes it, right? It could be low dopamine. It could be high histamine. Histamine's much more than just allergies. You guys may be thinking allergies. Histamine revs up the brain. We could talk about some things that histamine's a big factor for anxiety with people, especially with certain foods. We could touch on that later. But the serotonin and dopamine, they could be lower due to genetics. But if you have inflammation in your brain, if you have high histamine in your brain, which is a part of inflammation, your brain doesn't make as much serotonin and dopamine. So how many people are on these medications that artificially jack up serotonin and dopamine because they have inflammation, right? Or because they have high histamine in the brain, right?
So they would already create the right amount, but there's something else that's kind of blocking it from happening. But then we give them a pill to give them, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So what, it slows you from reuptaking serotonin, whereas we already are doing it enough. It's just the inflammation and the histamine that's blocking it in some people.
Exactly. And again, it's root cause, right? And, I like to tell people, your mood disorder is not a medication deficiency. I think I mentioned that earlier, right? So there's a lot of things that can lower serotonin. How we know that serotonin is actually a factor for you, right? And this also goes into the whole physiological versus psychological parts of mental health. So, physiological things of mental health, that's what I kind of focus on with people, right? Like your biochemistry, how can we fine tune that? Which is hugely important, but I will never ever claim that what I do is a full replacement for going to therapy, right? Getting your mind right? Because that's the psychological side. How are you treated as a child? Right? Those develop patterns and stuff. If you're someone that's a nonstop type A workaholic, you may have had issues getting approval or praise from your caregivers when you were younger, right? So this is where, therapy can play a role, but things that I do can play a role, right? It's not an either or thing, but
I can use that hardware software again, almost like software is kind of what you're thinking and hardware is your body. It's like you can have the best thoughts in the world, but if your body's deteriorating, it's not going to be able to support it anyway, and vice versa. You can have, all the best supplements, work on yourself physically, but then up here you're just running wild with, old operating system, then it's just like not getting to utilize the hardware that you've got. So I think it comes into that argument of like the physiology is so important, but also is the psychology behind it. But yeah, obviously today we focus on the physiology.
Absolutely. And I've worked with over 700 people at this point, and everyone's different, right? And I'm not going to sit here and claim I cure everyone 100% of everything always, right? No doctor could do that. But, I could probably count one, maybe two hands, how many people I've worked with that have literally told me, I don't feel any different whatsoever. And what I could say is those individuals, back to what you said, the hardware software, right? Some people can have a very victim mindset, right? Where their blood work's getting better, things are getting better, but people's minds can be kind of addicted to being sick, if that makes sense, right? Like sometimes people get more attention when they are sick and they don't want to give that up. I'm not saying that's ever, it depends on the person, right? But again, the psyche is so incredibly important. Right. Yeah. And this is why things like, I think we talked about psychedelics on the last episode, right? This is why psychedelics are such a great emerging tool in mental health. I think they are going to change the game. They already are in a lot of ways because they can help you get out of your own way, right? Because they can help you work through some of these limiting beliefs. That narrative or story you've been telling yourself your whole life. Nothing good happens to me. Everyone's out to get me, right? Generalizations, but some people that are depressed, they could think like that, right? And these substances can really, they're psychoactive, right? They show you a whole different world, a whole different way of thinking, and it's a new possibility, right? Like I like to give the example of eroding a river, like the Grand Canyon. it kind of relates to something called neuroplasticity. So the more you think a certain thing, the more you feed that pathway in the brain, that circuitry, those neural connections. So if
Mm.
your whole life, if you're thinking, this is how I live my life, this is how I live my life, this is my narrative, this is who I am, you keep reinforcing that, right? And these substances, these medicines, right, can really show you, oh my God, there's a whole new way to think. And then you start integrating that, right? It's not just about, I mean, hey, eating some mushrooms with your buddies in the park, can be fun, right? But like that won't be as deeply therapeutic or healing, right? Doing them in these proper ceremonial or clinically guided scenarios.
Yeah, let's talk about the psychedelic world then. You're obviously quite passionate about it and have some really interesting insights, especially in the mental health treatment side of things. So we're going to specifically talk on that side, not on the, party side of drugs,
Hmm.
which I think is important to destigmatize some stuff, but from a, molecular and cellular level, what's happening? Let's go through a few of them. Let's start with mushrooms. You already brought it up. Magic mushrooms are something that people, would have heard about before. They would have heard about someone getting stuck in a trip and all of this stuff. What's happening when we take psilocybin and what are magic mushrooms? And then, yeah, how can that help us change? Like, what's it doing in our brain?
Yeah. So, psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, DMT, those are all considered classical psychedelics, meaning they're all somewhat similar in that they all bind the serotonin 2A receptor. So this is like a receptor on your cells that normally binds to serotonin and DMT. So dimethyltryptamine, it's the most potent psychedelic in the world, but our brain naturally makes it. We release it when we dream. We release it when we die, right? So it's always we release it normally. So our brains are always sensing little bits of that DMT or that serotonin, right? That receptor. So, compared to something like MDMA or ecstasy or Molly, right? That makes your brain dump its own serotonin. That's why you can feel like shit afterwards, right? If you're not careful with it, right? It's more like a party thing and people have like, bad come
You
downs,
get the
this or
big
that,
up, but then you get the
because
come down because your body stops
because like a
making
sponge,
serotonin.
you're wringing your brain out from these neurotransmitters, right? So you dump all of it. I call that a depleting substance. These classical psychedelics are non-depleting because they're mimetics, meaning they're so similar in shape to serotonin, they fit that receptor and they lock on in there. Obviously, it's a lot stronger than your own serotonin, right? But we need to remember these things that these substances bind to, it's the same thing that our own serotonin binds to. It just fits a little differently. So that's what gives kind of the warping visuals, right? The altered state of consciousness, possibly the paranoia, right? Depending on the individual. So, yeah, the altered states, and some people will have these realizations, right? Like, what's a bad trip? To me, a bad trip is when these medicines show you something about yourself you're not willing to accept. So, let's just say you take some mushrooms, you're with some friends, and you start getting in your own head and you start reflecting and you realize that maybe there were a couple times in your life that you were an asshole, right? Let's just say it how it is, right? You're looking back and you're like, okay, I didn't treat those people well. Bad trip happens when you say, why this isn't real. Why is this happening? When is it over? Right? The second you ask when is it going to end, right? That's usually when the bad trips start with people because then it's only been an hour. It feels like it's been 10 hours, right? The substances always wear off. There's never been a person in the history of humans that took these substances and didn't sober up after, right? Like, so,
So what's this stuck in
uh,
a trip thing called? Like I've heard of stories, but I've never met someone. I've heard of people who are like, someone took mushrooms and then they thought they were a beach chair for the rest of their life, and they just and I was I've heard stories
yeah,
like that.
yeah, I'm really hard pressed to think that that's really, again, I think, again, everyone's heard of someone on Reddit that did that happened to, right? That being said, these can be very healing substances. They can also be very traumatizing too, right? If you do these in the wrong settings, right? Like it could definitely
Well,
be traumatizing as well.
well, and as well, we can come back to your example you used. It can be traumatizing because somebody who, let's face it, is an asshole. The medicine points out to them what they've been turning a blind eye to because they've just, that's just them, and they don't think they've got a problem, and then the medicine brings it up, and then that makes them realize they're an asshole. That's where I guess you can get stuck in a
Yep.
trip. Or like if you fight it and go, no, I'm not, you get stuck. Or you accept it and go, you know what, like this is trying to show me something that I need to change.
Well, and too, without a doubt, that 5 hour or so mushroom trip, it can feel like 12 hours, right? But that being said, there's no way pharmacologically these things just aren't going to wear off. Now, if you do have a really bad trip and you overdo it, can you sober up and not be the same person, right? Like, so you kind of see you're not literally tripping for the rest of your life, right? That's just not going to happen. But can you be traumatized and be different in maybe not such a good way if you do have a bad trip and you aren't supported properly?
Yeah.
Yes. But, to me, bad trips can result in the best outcome as long as you're willing to accept it, right? So, as long as you're willing to accept whatever these things are showing you, and be open to it, right? And you should be going into utilizing these things, hoping for
As a
change,
medicine.
wanting
Yeah. And
change, right? Like that's the point of it. And again, that's why a lot of times people do, the more recreational party side of stuff, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm in some deep shit right here, right? This is not. I'm in my own head. Everyone's partying. It's all this stuff going on, loud music, whatever, right? Versus these low stimulating environments where they do more of the ceremonial things. So." Yeah, it binds that serotonin receptor. LSD also acts on the dopamine system. So a lot of people report that could be a bit more uppy, a bit more like stimulatory. Um, and yeah, that actual receptor, that serotonin receptor, that can be mutated in people. And when it's mutated, what can it be linked to? Well, it could be linked to depression because basically your brain can't get high off its own supply as well. So your brain can't detect your serotonin as well or your own DMT as well. So these are the individuals that, I've seen can respond very, very well to something like a microdose. Because if you think about it, part of their missing puzzle piece is that receptor needs a little bit more love, right? And you could do an SSRI to help stimulate it. But then you're gonna you stimulate all the other receptors, right? So you see, how do you just target that one? Because otherwise you get side effects. Why do people get numb? Sexual issues, GI issues, stomach issues from these medications, because you're giving too much serotonin to your body, right? So yeah, I'm really excited for the future of this. There's a real big intersection, how you metabolize these things, how your body responds to these things, who could be a better candidate for one versus the other, and dosages as well.
yeah, in America, it's now been legalized MDMA and ketamine therapy. What yeah, what have you seen in that in the last couple of years? Has there been any sort of studies or any breakthroughs? Have you heard any stories? I know they've been doing it a lot with veterans, different psychedelic exposure therapy after PTSD in people.
Yeah.
In the world that you're in,
Yeah.
have you heard of any research coming out of the impacts in that clinical setting?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I used to keep up with it a lot more. Now that I've been kind of building, my business with the genetics and the supplement stuff. But
Yeah.
what I could share on that is, they're different vehicles, different tools, right? So the MDMA, that's the Molly ecstasy, right? And it's, been shown that it's not nearly as neurotoxic as people think. Most of the neurotoxicity comes from overheating. So when people take it at raves, right? It's 110 degrees, it's in a warehouse, you're sweating, right? Most of the damage actually happens from overheating, not the substance itself. That being said, I'm not saying everyone it's free reign, go ham, go crazy with your ecstasy, right? Not what I'm saying here whatsoever, but the studies that they did that they said how it rots holes in your brain, right? From the 90s and stuff. Turns out they accidentally used methamphetamine instead of MDMA. So yeah, meth is highly neurotoxic. So all these studies that they show the monkey brains, right? How it rots holes in the brain, that was meth. It wasn't MDMA. So the MDMA, it's more of an opener. It can open you up, and you know, I've had friends that can be very closed off and withdrawn, and they go out to take a little bit of MDMA to have some fun, whatever, and they end up just talking so much and opening up, right? They're able to share and you're able to reconfront harmful memories. That's why it's great for PTSD.
And is
You're
that where
able
in
to
a
kind of,
clinical setting, they'll put someone in a bed, they'll give you a dose, and then have a doctor or a clinician be there with you, listen to I've seen videos of it, people who like listen to different music to stimulate, talk therapy while on this to help, encourage that opening up. Is that kind of how it
yeah,
works in the clinical setting? Yeah, it's like you take the dosage, you sit there and wait for it to come on, and then have the support and the safety of a clinician
exactly.
with you.
Keywords of support, right? You need to have the right questions to ask. And normally you go anywhere near a traumatic memory for someone with PTSD, they shut down, right? They lock up and they can't go there. This enables them to go a lot deeper and confront these things, right? And maybe it allows them to go deeper and realize, what happened, right? But maybe it wasn't. Maybe a lot of people may blame themselves for something, right? In war or something like that. They may blame themselves for what happened, and they're not even able to get through to the point where they realize it wasn't their fault, right? And that can be freeing in certain ways, right? Ketamine, more of a dissociative. So it's a non-classical psychedelic. It doesn't bind that serotonin receptor. It binds the NMDA receptor, which it can dissociate you. So the real value in that can be, imagine being able to observe your own thoughts from the third person. So imagine if you can like see your own thoughts and hear your own thoughts and feel like they're coming from someone else. And you can realize, wow, that type of thinking makes no freaking sense. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's like sometimes we're so in our own way, especially with mental illness, that again, the story you keep telling yourself, you can't even proofread or cross-reference and realize, right? Wait, this doesn't even add up here, right? So that's how that can also help you view these things from a different perspective. But on top of that, all these substances, especially the ketamine, the classical psychedelics, they stimulate neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So they can really strengthen these new connections. So you're
Growing new
able to
brain
have this
cells is what that
growing new
means for
brain
everyone.
cells,
Yeah.
strengthening existing ones, right?
Yeah.
So some people have a harder time growing brain cells genetically. So these substances can be particularly useful. Really excited to see where it goes. I like to tell people, we need to make sure we get the clinical side of things down first, right? Because again, you can really mess yourself up if you're just taking these things willy-nilly, not in a proper setting. They could be equally as damaging as they are healing. Just make sure you're doing it in a right, safe setting. You don't have any obligations that could kind of throw off. Oh, I forgot I gotta go do this thing, and you fixate on it, right? Because the mind is in a very fragile state on these things.
Yeah. No, thanks for going in there with me. And as you'll say and I'll say, not in all any way endorsing to take any of these substances.
Yeah.
Just interesting from a mental health lens to see that
Yeah.
there is a new way to look at some of these challenges. And there is people who, I'll use your reference, have been creating this path in their mind for their whole life, and they're standing at the bottom of this Grand Canyon and they're looking at the top edge going like, how am I meant to get out of this rut that I've created for myself? If it's like, everything else I've been trying isn't working, and in Australia, I don't think it's not illegal anyway, so you can't really do much with it in Australia.
Yeah.
But I think it's just exciting to see where the future can
I think
potentially go.
I think MDMA. I think MDMA might be in Australia. I think they might have been the first ones actually. I know it was
Yeah.
surprising because Australia is usually very strict with that stuff, right? Remember, I think they did it before the U.S. So I think that might be available. But
What about
again,
marijuana? Because marijuana you can get medically here in Australia from your
yeah,
doctor. What about marijuana from a mental health, from a affecting your cells and yeah, good, bad,
yeah. So
use
so
as a
that
tool, use as a
also
medicine. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like anything, it can be abused, right? There's a very big difference between using it occasionally and very intentionally versus having a little bit each evening to unwind and go to sleep versus waking up and ripping dabs, right? And just being high all day, every day, right? Very, very big difference there.
Yeah.
A lot of people will talk about how horrible it is for the brain. And, my stance on this is It's definitely very, very bad for the developing brain. I'm open that, I utilize cannabis, but I didn't start utilizing it till the end of college. So I was, 21, 22 years old, and I'm really, really glad I waited until then. And for me, brings out, it uplifts my mood, brings a lot of creativity, right? And then for some people, you got to find the right types, right? It could definitely be anxiety causing as well. And, I do know there are some people doing ceremonial cannabis type things. I just don't see it. That's not like really in the clinical side, more so kind of people on their own with their communities doing these things. I do see the value in it. I definitely don't think it's for everyone. I mean, I think most people have that story where they, took an edible that was too strong or something, right? And that can be really, really terrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's an interesting one when you start to look at all these different plants as like medicine rather than as drugs, like we've kind of been told for so long. It opens up your kind of world to, hey, there's more than just what I get told from this one group of people to,
Yep.
yeah, to do for my health. I want to round back to two different topics. One, I want to talk about nutrition and how that affects us because you did touch on that diet. But first, I just want to quickly go back because something that you kind of hear quite often when it comes to genetics, or anyway, I have, and let's focus on breast cancer because that's something that you mentioned that was part of your PhD. I've heard before that we all have cancer cells in our body, but we can fight them off. And it's like when your environment triggers a mutation, which is then when we start to end up with cancer. Am I way off the mark there, or is there some truth into like I've just heard that we
No,
kind of
no,
all have cancerous cells, but there's things that can like promote them to take off and metastasize, or we like can naturally fight them off. Is that kind of
yeah.
in the
So no,
ballpark?
yeah, no, there definitely is some truth to that. So yeah, a cancer cell is a healthy cell that for one reason or another got a genetic mutation. So, the
Yeah.
mutations I help people with, they're all inherited. So if you get a new mutation after you're born, that's more or less the start of cancer, right? So that's when I say your genes, whether you get a cheek swab from me the day you're born or the day you die, it's going to be the exact same information, right? But when you get these mutations, and what can do that? Sun exposure, right? Sunburn, excessive sunburn can do that. Um, you could have every time your cells turns one cell into two cells, it splits. You need to copy and paste all the DNA, right? You need to multiply it and then split it, right? You got to copy paste. During that copy paste process, you're copying the DNA letter by letter, and there's an error rate in that copy paster machine, basically. So I'm gonna throw out a number here. Let's just say every 1,000 letters. Let's say that's probably
Yeah.
not right, but just every 1,000 letters, it messes it up. There's proofreading systems where the DNA you could cut that DNA out and put the right one in. So there's a lot of fail safes that your cells have during this replication process because our cells are multiplying all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, that first mutation, yeah, we do have cells that have mutations that are occurring all the time, but we have a lot of measures to kind of make sure we fix it if we can't proofread it properly. If we can't proofread it and now that cell just has that mutation, what does that mutation do? Maybe that mutation allows the cell to grow faster. It multiplies quicker. Well, that is the beginning of cancer. Now, your cells can also tell that cell to basically commit suicide. It's called apoptosis. So if you can't proofread the DNA and now that cell actually has the mutation, your body will try to tell it to kill itself, basically, right? Let's just get rid of that. Let's just start fresh because something's wrong. Cancer really occurs once you have one mutation, you're more likely to get the next one and the next one and the next one. So let's just say that mutation, normally your cells will have a checkpoint when they try to replicate. So they can't just keep growing. Well, maybe that mutation allows it to just keep growing around the clock. And what does that mean? More cancer cells, right? They grow, grow, grow. Then let's say one of them gets mutated again. Now that cancer cell can grow blood vessels easier, let's say, right? Because at a certain point, as that tumor's growing, it'll start to die because it can't get blood, right? But if those cancer cells now, I like to think of it as they get superpowers, right? It's or super villain powers, right? We'll call them, right? So they get super like
Yeah.
a super villain. They get new, more and more superpowers over time. I actually thought of this. You ever seen the Marvel movies like Thanos?
Yep.
Yeah, so
He's
imagine him with the
collecting the
Infinity
Infinity
Stones.
Stones. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Wow, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so collecting each Infinity Stone, right? You need to be able to grow around the clock. You need to be able to grow new blood vessels. Eventually, one of the Infinity Stones, now the cancer cells can chew up collagen, and think of it like a miner. It can mine through, like imagine like an ant farm, right? How they kind of like burrow down. Now that cancer cell can burrow around, and that's how it metastasizes.
And that's when you
So
hear it
if you
gets in your
think about
bloodstream and it goes all over your body kind of thing.
exactly, and then they also have to survive in the bloodstream. Most cancer cells that enter the bloodstream, they're not going to survive because it's such high velocity. But the cancer cell that has that other infinity stone, that now it can survive in the
Transport.
bloodstream. So you see, it's like natural selection, right? Like, so yes, we are making cancer cells all the time. The vast majority of them are getting destroyed. And it's, again, you need to artificially select for, it's like trial and error. Up, you have a tumor, they start to migrate, it dies, it dies. Eventually, you could have that perfect storm where it can then go somewhere else and grow over long periods of time. So, yeah, what you said there, there's definitely some truth to that.
So now
It
knowing
depends
all
what you consider
that, though,
cancer.
yeah. Well, now knowing all that, how can we, from an environment point of view, but also from a supplementation or pharmacological point of view, let's not just call specifically cancer, but how can we best, basically, the way I'm trying to look at it is, how can we best support ourselves to be star players, not people who
Yeah.
are, cutting corners and making mistakes that get brushed under the rug until the rug fucking has a big lump
Yep.
under it and grows into
Yep.
something. Another
Yeah.
weird
So, I
analogy to
mean,
try and explain the
yeah,
question.
I'm biased, of course, right? But I like telling people finding those missing puzzle pieces,
Yeah,
right?
there you
Like,
go.
but beyond that though, things that can cause the genetic mutations, right? Some examples are, I check a gene in women, well, it affects men as well, but mainly women, where how they break down estrogen. If you break it down into what's called the 4OH form, that's been linked. It can damage your DNA. And again, we want to minimize things that are damaging our DNA because the more damage there is, the more we have to proofread, right? And remember, there's going to be that small chance, right, that you can't proofread as well. You may have heard of like the BRCA gene. You ever heard of that gene before?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I
involved with
have.
breast cancer, ovarian cancer. That's more or less a mutation in your proofreading capabilities. So some people that are prone to cancer, this is why we can test for these things. Doesn't guarantee you'll get cancer, right? But if you're genetically hardwired to not proofread as well, even if you don't do a lot of damage, right? If you can't proofread, you have a lot higher chance of having these issues. So, pesticides, right? Environmental toxins, industrial toxins, glyphosate, right? The pesticide, the herbicide. Dosage does play a role, but a lot of these things, your genetics make you more at risk. So, for example, glyphosate, you're familiar with glyphosate?
Yep. It's
Yeah, it's in
pesticides we spray
Roundup.
on most of our. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, we can see genetic mutations if you're more prone to glyphosate, higher levels in the body. And when I see that come up with someone, I'll ask them, do you live near any golf courses, airports, farms, large grassy areas throughout your life? And if they say yes, oh yeah, I live right near a golf course. So yeah, I work on a farm, right? We look into getting them tested because not only are they more likely to be exposed to that, but on top of that, they have a higher genetic risk. So you kind of see it's like your genetics can dictate how sensitive you are to your lifestyle and your world. People like to think it's either environment or genetics, but they're all one and the same. So yeah, we
Yeah.
want to try to enough antioxidants. We don't want to be a lot of oxidative stress. Inflammation is bad. That can cause DNA damage as well. I know these are very broad brushstrokes, right? But I mean, that's really what you want to try to watch out for. Skin cancer, you know, you want to avoid blistering sunburns, right? But Healthy, unprotected sun exposure, I think, is very important for human health. Sunscreen can prevent us from making vitamin D. Personally, I slowly expose. I'm in New York, so I'll have the winter then the summer. I slowly start exposing myself, not wearing sunscreen, maybe for a 10-minute run, right? And slowly over time to build up a slow tan. If I get a little red here or there, I'm not very concerned about that. But if I had to choose, let's just say in the middle of the winter, I went to Florida, super white, right? Like a ghost, right? I would rather use sunscreen than fry super badly, right? So it's like, oh, you want to limit that, but the sun, the more people are in the sun, the less they have the skin cancers, right? So another thing too, you don't want to be afraid of the sun. You just want to make sure that you're being protected and you're not overdoing it, which can be very hard when most of us are inside on our phones all day, right? Then you go outside for a full beach day.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I find the whole the skin cancer and sunscreen and sun is bad debate really fascinating, which I'm not going to go
Yeah.
too much more into with. I just want to finish now with just around diet and how
Yeah.
important that is when it comes to mental health and our genes. And, you can be eating a healthy diet, but it's not right for your gene makeup is kind of what I'm hearing. So as I said, my, I guess, recommendation for everyone is to try and get your genes tested if it is within your price range, and you can do that. If not, what's some of the sort of basic things that you've seen with your clients have been easy wins, easy things to cut out of the diet, easy things to add that's a bit more of a generic answer?
Yeah. So, I want to break it up into a few components, right? There's trying to figure out trying to get a word this, what types of fats to eat, right? Are you more sensitive to saturated fat and you may want to have less red meat, more chicken and fish, right? There's that. But what I really like focusing on are what I call excitatory foods. Now, I mentioned that histamine before, right?
Yep.
It's more than just allergies. Histamine regulates wakefulness. This is why antihistamines can make you groggy because they make you feel sleepy. So there are something called histamine intolerance. It's very overlooked. It's very, very common. And it basically means your body can't process histamine very well. We ought to think of it like a bucket. What's filling up your histamine bucket? Turns out a lot of my anxiety issues, my brain fog issues when I was during grad school, it were histamine issues. So your genetics make you more prone to higher histamine. But I realized, took me a while to figure this out. Certain foods can be high in histamine or they can release histamine in your body. So some examples are coffee, roasted hot coffee, tomatoes, fermented foods, vinegars, avocados. There's a huge list of foods, but these are some of the ones I see cause issues for people where if I have a tomato, I will feel activated, meaning, is it like I have a tomato, I have a panic attack? No. But will I feel like a little more on edge, right? So if you're listening and anxiety is when, oh my God, I'm fearful about something, right? I know what I'm scared of. But what if you're activated or meaning you feel like you're anxious, but you're not actually fearing anything, right? So when I work with people with anxiety, I ask them, do you just feel like you're just anxious for no reason at all? And they're like, oh my God, yes. I like to use the word activated, right? So depending, do you break down histamine in your gut very slowly? Some people, the gene that processes histamine in your gut, think of like Pac-Man breaking down histamine, doesn't work as well. I just had a client today, 9 mutations in that gene. So you can supplement to help break down the histamine, but also make some smart diet changes. So like I've had people get off of their sleeping medications by stopping to having tomato sauce for dinner. Now, I could go viral and say that that's the cure to everyone's sleep issues, right? But I'm not, right? It depends on the person, right? Some people do tomatoes fine. I don't want you guys listening to think, oh my God, I can never have tomatoes again, right? It depends on your own biology. So sulfur, it's another element we need to live in. We need to live. When that gets too high, it also releases histamine. So some foods that are high in sulfur, garlic, onions, broccoli, Brussels sprout, kale, radishes, organ meats. So if I have too much garlic or onions, guess what? I'll feel activated. If I have more, I'll get brain fog, I'll get a headache. So whether it's anxiety, brain fog, headaches, restlessness, low mood, these all can be due to these foods. Now, again, I don't want you guys listening to think, oh my God, I can never eat these again, right? You need to figure out which things you're sensitive to. But especially with highly sensitive people, I work with a lot of highly sensitive people, neurodivergent, whether ADHD, OCD, autism spectrum disorder, all of these things exist on the genetic level because your brain is hardwired to be more sensitive to these molecules. So these high histamine is linked to ADHD, right? So you kind of see what I'm saying. I'm not going to claim that you stop eating garlic and onions and your ADHD will go away, right? For everyone. But have I had people, I work with a lot of children where, they start having a low sulfur afternoon snack instead of a high sulfur afternoon snack, and they're able to sit down and do their homework a lot better, right? Absolutely. So I just don't want people to take this, sweeping statements, right? Like, oh, tomatoes are the cause of everyone's mental health. Not what I'm saying here, but I see this matter for a lot of people. And who would have thought? Let me give you an example. This is how easy it can be to overwhelm your histamine system. Someone wakes up in the morning, they have a cup of black coffee. That has a lot of histamine. They also have a shot of apple cider vinegar for their gut health. That's also high in histamine. Then they go to the gym. Exercise releases histamine, which is a normal part. Then they get done with the gym. They have a kombucha protein drink. Fermented drinks are high in histamine. Do you see how you're spiking so much histamine in the morning, right? That's why you're lightheaded after working out. That's why you're so anxious. That's why you have the brain fog. So for a lot of people, simply switching to a cold brew, that's lower in histamine, right? And maybe you don't have the apple cider vinegar, right? So you see just these shifts or changes, or, have you ever heard of the glutathione supplement before?
No.
Glutathione is the number one antioxidant in the body. Or have you ever heard of N-acetylcysteine? That's the building block for glutathione. My point is, very powerful antioxidants. A lot of doctors recommend them like candy. They're very rich in sulfur. So again, I've had people where they take their glutathione in the morning, their doctor recommended, and they have a headache or brain fog. They can't figure out why. So,
So we'll doing your testing with the genes. I'm just trying to like make this practical in a way that if someone's come to you, they've been like, this is what I usually eat during my day. This is what my gene makeup is. You can kind of be like, like you're feeling like this. I'm not saying it's definitely because of this, but let's take tomatoes and this out of your diet and see if you're feeling better and see if your blood's improved. Yep, they have. Amazing. We found the cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's like
and
elimination
I can kind of tell people too, based on how many mutations they have, is it more like, hey, the sulfur stuff might be an issue? Again, do you have 3 mutations there? Maybe I'm like, okay, this might be an issue. If you have 9 mutations there, I'm like, buddy, you got to listen to this, right? So you can kind of see it doesn't mean, and I tell people, listen, try making some of these changes. Swear to God, I've had people, their tinnitus goes away within a day. Their anxiety goes away. For some people. For other people, they say, hey, I tried it. I did it thoroughly. I didn't feel a change. And I'm like, you know what? No big deal, right? Because what I do, I'm not here to give prescriptions. I'm here to show you patterns about your body, right? Like there's always a cause and effect. And my job is to show you, a really major factor for mental health is understanding what is your external world, right? The triggers life throws at you. And what is your internal biochemistry, right? So I'll give you an example. Imagine if I could clone myself. Both clones of Tyler 1 and Tyler 2, we're both going to get a really nasty email and it's going to stress us out, right? Tyler 1 has lunch and he has a low sulfur, low histamine lunch, my normal lunch. That's how I eat now for my body. Tyler 2 has tomatoes, garlic, onions, and then we both get that email. Tyler 2 that had the high sulfur, high histamine, my nervous system will already be primed because histamine revs up the brain. It releases adrenaline, right? So I'll already be like a coiled up spring, right? I'll already be a little wound up. So then I get that email and I'm like, like I react more dramatically, right? Because I'm already wound up. So did those foods cause the anxiety, right? It's kind of not necessarily, right? But for me, I'm able to understand, okay, I had that food, it had onions, I didn't realize it. And that's happened to me, right? Like I would do these meal prep companies, and I found out after having this one meal for a couple of days, I'd feel kind of like anxious and irritable at night. Turns out there were tiny diced onions in the food. I couldn't see them. So you see how like it's not that I can never eat these ever. But imagine if you're not aware of this pattern. You eat garlic and onions all day, every day, and you always feel stressed for no reason, right? But once you need to understand, is this life stressor? Am I responding excessively, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. No, it just seems like so much of it all comes back to regulating the nervous system. Like the food we eat has an effect on our nervous system, the environment we're in, the actions we take when it comes to things like breath work, meditation, sort of slowing down that default mode network. Yeah, there's just so many different things that we can do that
Yeah.
I think the main takeaway is just to take action. If you're not feeling great, go and get a genetic test, see someone like Tyler. As I said, I'll leave in the show notes how to connect with you if after our conversation today you want to learn more, or if you know you are in that debilitating depression and you've seen doctors and it's not working for you, you know, not experimenting with drugs, but seeing if there is access to psychedelic therapy at all, or you know, just thinking outside the square and not losing hope, I think is the main thing that I want to people to
Yeah,
get out
and
from
hey,
today.
I even have the free, email newsletter. I drop stuff every week about that too, right? So
Perfect.
it's
I'll
like,
put that in the show notes.
yeah, what I offer, it's a premium white glove service, right? It's me, the expert, hand making your report. I meet with every client one on one, right? This is not a do it yourself type thing. So I know it's, not for everyone, right? That being said, I'm really looking forward to building many different options, right? And expanding ways to get people, help and support. And yeah, I have some free, course resources there as well. The free email newsletter to stay in the loop, when these things, it's not if, it's when, right? And it's kind of
Yeah.
trying to figure out, how do you take this super deep science that I do one on one? How do you find a way to break that down and get it to the masses without losing too much of the magic, right? Because some of the magic is going super deep one on one with somebody. But again, how do we put that into bite sized pieces for others?
For sure. Well, I guess best first step is go follow Tyler on Instagram. About to hit 100,000 followers. Epic to see the growth that you've had and the information you put out, the knowledge you're sharing, and connecting with people. So step one, go check out the show notes. Follow Tyler on Instagram. Step two, I'll leave a link to your website so you can sign up to the email list. And yeah, if you are in a position to, get onto Tyler to get your swab done and yeah, have a bit more of a detailed look into your genetics, yeah, highly recommend it. I'm going to be doing that myself because I'm yeah, fascinated to work out how to get the most out of ourselves and how to make this vessel that we're all given work optimally. So mate, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up again. I've loved every minute of our chat. We've gone into some deep science, which hopefully everyone listening, we did it well to cross over science, some analogies, and make it practical.
Hopefully we
but the
didn't go
main
too deep, right?
Yeah, nah, never go too deep. We have all different types of conversations here. Two last things. I'll ask you the question I always ask everyone, which has been asked before, but I'm keen to hear what you say today. But is there anything I didn't ask you today that you feel like I probably should have, that you want to share with the audience, just quickly? Or anything you got coming up that you're excited to share about, or you can say, nah, we hit it all. It's just means I
Yeah,
answer
no,
the right questions.
yeah. Give me a sec. Let me think. I could definitely think of something here. Yeah, I think, nowadays in the world where there's so much contradictory health information out there, right? Everyone needs this supplement. No one take that supplement. This food, that food. If you guys follow someone, doesn't matter how credentialed they are, how smart they seem, the certifications, this and that. If you see someone outright demonizing or outright praising any one supplement or nutrient or food for everyone, you really want to be mindful of that, right? Because we are all different and unique, right? So people ask me, my DMs are filled with this supplement, that supplement. My answer is always it depends, right? So if you're following people that say no one should take vitamin D ever, or never take melatonin, or everyone needs vitamin D, right? Might want to take what they say with a grain of salt, because the absolutist stuff it sells like hotcakes, right? People that are very absolutist, no one, everyone, this, that, that's what goes viral on Instagram because it's catchy, but it's not true. So that information is right and wrong just depending on who's listening.
Based on your genetics.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing. I think it's good one. That might be a little Instagram clip. I think that one because yeah, I think it. There's obviously so much incredible information, and you're never taking away from someone who says this is an amazing supplement. But yes, it is, and it might be for majority of people, but it might not work for you. So it's so important to have that, detailed understanding of your own health, your own genetics, your own blood work before you say this is perfect for you. So I love the way that don't ever give people
Well, or at
absolutes
least
until you
too.
have the information.
Yeah, I like to say too is, it's not even so much you have to have the full genetics, the full blood work before you try a supplement. With my content, I like to educate people what a supplement does that can help you and what can also hurt you, right? So again, it's like as long as you're just aware of, hey, this supplement does this thing in the body, but it could feel this way if I'm not responding well. And just at least knowing what it might feel like if you're not responding well, right? So then you could swiftly just discontinue it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to just understand like the pros and cons of things and to be able to
Exactly.
make up your own best sort of informed decision based on how you're actually feeling, not just like, hey, this should be working for me. I kind of feel shitty taking it though, but it should work. It's like, well, no, you stop taking it. But man, it's been an absolute pleasure. I do finish with the same question. I've asked it to you before. I'm guessing it's going to be a different answer this time, which I'm excited for. So what does being a good human mean to Tyler Panzner?
I feel like what I want to say is probably what I said before. So I'm going to try to give a little
No,
bit of
no,
a
say it again.
derivative
I'll have to
here.
go. I'll have to go
Yeah.
back and listen and see if it
Yeah.
is the same.
I think I think being a good human is simply shining your light, right? I think a lot of people can be trying to figure out what their thing is, right? What their shtick is, right? And I think we all have value to give to the world. And it's not even necessarily about how big of a good thing that is, right? I think as long as you're focusing on contributing and putting something good out into the world, you don't need to be, doing genetic analysis for people or having a big podcast or a big business or this or that. You can just be that person that says, have a great day to people walking by, right? So just giving more good energy into the world is one thing. And I think also trying to, it's one thing to vent, right? And get things off your chest. But I think trying to be mindful of, I guess the word might be, I don't know, excessive venting. I guess trying to be mindful of when you're not in the best headspace, right? And when you already have, shared with people or you already have vented to try not excessively radiate some of that negativity for people, right? Especially if you're someone that it might just be having a bad day, right? So it's putting out the good energy when you have it there, but also trying to, I don't want to say hold in the bad energy, right? We do need to talk about things, but I think there's a time and place. And sometimes, even myself, honestly, sometimes I can get kind of all wound up in my stress or whatever and kind of radiate that, right? So that's something I'm trying to work on for myself, right? But yeah, first and foremost, really, really not shying away from any little bit of positive energy, because to me, the focus shouldn't be it's a little bit or a lot of it, just sharing that positivity.
I love that. The idea of, sharing your light. And then, if you are having a hard day, taking some responsibility to do something about it. If that is talking to someone amazing, but yeah, like you said, not excessively. Just understanding there is things that we can do for ourselves and really trying to step up and take that accountability. But mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will have in the show notes your social media, your website link, and way people can get in touch. But man, thank you so much for jumping on again. Good Humans Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and let's do this sooner than 3 years from now next time, right?
Yeah,
Great time as always. Excited to see what we're both up to after that. Hope all you guys listening got a lot of value out of this, and thanks again.
yeah, absolutely. We'll try and do this maybe a yearly thing so we can stay up to date with what's going on in your world, any information that's going to be great to pass on the audience. So we'll catch up shorter than 3 to 4 years this time, but man, it's been great to watch you grow on socials and everything. And yeah, we'll be catching up very soon. Thanks for jumping on.